in hindsight, I think that's shout out to the history teachers of the world.
Yep.
To the people like me who
Very
didn't pay
important.
attention. I think
Me neither, actually.
to a degree, that's why I didn't pay attention to history, because I felt like in other classes, it was very much interactive with the teacher. It was very much like, especially in like literature, they'd be like, okay, this book, this is the theme about this. So-and-so, can you raise your hand and tell me what your interpretation is? I always felt like in history, there was no interaction. It was just like a guy being like, okay, ba 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 ba. And I'm like, I'm the type of, like, podcasting is a great medium for me to learn. Like, that's why I invited a, professional historian, because I'm like, we can interact and I can actually learn something. But if I'm just sitting there, and even reading books like is good for me, because I can read a paragraph and then stop and say, all right, let me underline this word, let me go online. And so it's like in a way interactive, but just like with me and the internet. But like that was one of my big things with history in school, is like they don't stop and interact with the audience. Like they just won't shut the up.
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, high school, again, like shout out to all high school history teachers. We need you out there. You're the lifeblood for the organization that runs, but of history. But the way they approach it, it's very like just chronological. They want to get you through the timelines. They want to get you out because they're working on a timeline too for the the whole fucking school year. They got to rush with that and contend with that, which sucks too. So I think it's hard for them to slow down and get more personal with it, because they want you to they not want you to understand. They just want to be able to get through the lesson plan without being behind. But I wish. No, I totally agree though. But I wish it wasn't taught like that, because history is there's so many different interpretations too. I mean, historians, they work on sources. If there's no sources for things, there's no potential interpretation. There's no story. And sometimes there are 50 sources on one thing, and you got to sort of put them all together and make your own interpretation of them. It happens all the time. Like again, the thesis, what I wrote on, the subject of my thesis, TDS Gung, Lenape orator and soldier and spokesperson for his people, and from 1755, 54 to about 1763 when he was murdered. He was burned alive in this freaking cabin in Susquehanna Valley, Pennsylvania. But he was murdered by settlers who wanted his land. But that guy, he spoke at the Treaty of Easton in 1756, and it was in Easton, Pennsylvania. And one of my favorite historians, James Merrill, he wrote an article called Revisiting TDS Gung's 1756 Treaty of Easton Speeches. And he begins it by offering 7 different accounts of one event of one part of what he spoke at that conference, and they all had different things. It was like, the first guy was like, what did TDS Gung actually say during April 26th or during the 5 days or 4 days for the treaty, because it took place over a couple of days in Easton in 1756, and he had like a bunch of different accounts. It's so insane to see that 7 different accounts were written down. There were 7 different interpretations while it was happening, with 7 different agendas. Some wanted to bring this back to the king. Some wanted to bring it back to somebody to write it, to do a paper story on it. 1756, by the way. Someone wanted to write it for just the the good of the world. Ben Franklin was there, who apparently took notes for his autobiography or something like that. Things like that. Now, there are 7 different events in this one day. Yet a history, I guess what I'm trying to bring it back to, a history teacher would just teach it as, this was an event and he spoke at this event, and now we're moving on. Because I just want you to know the name, I want you to know the date, and I want you to know the relevance of it,
right.
and we're moving on.
It's not so much about the story, the actual story of the history. Like you don't really get into the depth of what was going on and try to paint a picture of the actual scene. It's more just here's the name,
which sucks, which is why history is so boring. But it's when you really get because I mean, even for me, I did not do well in high school at all. I almost failed out of high school. I had no motivation to do anything. I got very bad grades. I did very poorly. Just didn't care, right? I know, man. I didn't see a need for it in my life at that point. And I remember history, if I could speak to myself at age 18 and be growing up, you'll have a master's in history and you'll be a historian, you're working for a company, you're going to do whatever you're going to do, I would be like, shut up. You're totally wrong. That's not true, because history is boring as shit. but once you get to the micro histories of that, I was just saying, when you look past the date and the event and the timeline for it and look at the story behind it, it gets really fucking cool. The TDS Gung thing, that was blew my mind to see that there were 7 different interpretations of what 7 different people wrote down 7 different things in pretty much the same moment. And they all walked away with different agendas, different things. So what's the right source? What are we writing about? So that's why it was Merrill's approach should just pretty much say, We don't know. We might not be able to ever know, but here's just what it is. So history, that's a very interesting thing too. It's very interpretive. It's very imaginative. You know, you always have to, I think there's a historian named Daniel Richter, and his big thing is like, imagination is always great to have for a historian in their back pocket, because you need that to put the story together, because you can see who's speaking, or you can read who's speaking to somebody, but what's the context? Where were they? What rooms were they in? What were the rooms built out of? You know, did it smell like shit? You know, stuff like that. Like,
yeah.